another classic JP and the Beans top 5, because we know that's what keeps you coming back.
Absolutely.
Dear loyal listener. So on the topic of TV shows, we wanted to hit our top 5 favorite TV shows of all time. So not necessarily in the superhero genre, but just extensively, holistically, what is it that we have loved on the TV show side? So our top 5 favorites. Riley, you go first.
Okay, number 5. We're getting right into it. Okay.
Number
5, because
Yep.
if you don't have this on your top 5, I don't know what you're doing with your
You're
life. I have The Office at number 5. Okay, now look. I love The Office. I have been unable to rewatch it because of a couple of things, okay? Don't get me wrong. It's one of the very few shows where I have laughed through every episode.
Yep.
Every episode made me laugh. It's part of me is like, it's too cringy at some points. Okay? Michael Scott is a cringe fest. Okay? And sometimes I can't do it. And there's like a 4 episode span in like season 3 or season 4 where I'm like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Now, I'm sure I could eventually do it. And someday I will. And it'll probably be with a wife. So it won't be in the next 20 years. But anyways, besides the point. You have to have The Office on here out of respect. It is an absolute classic. 10 out of 10.
Love that.
I have The Office at number 5.
I love that. For me, my number 5 is Modern Family. In general, a lot of comedies for me are going to show up on this list.
Same.
Yeah, and I think that just kind of lends itself to the TV show format, let's call it. Another one of those shows, I like what you said a lot about The Office, where you've laughed through every episode. That's what Modern Family has been for me. And part of what I really enjoy about it, though, aside from the humor, is that in each episode, particularly in the first several seasons, like it ends up going on like many TV shows do. It lasts or is allowed to live longer than it should have. Like I think it went to like season 11 or something in that ballpark. It's like it really should have been tied off like by season 8 or 9. But I appreciated that that it made an effort to not just like tear characters down for the expense of humor or at the expense of humor, but it also tried to send a positive message.
Absolutely.
Right. And that was really worthwhile. I found that refreshing. My number 4 is a bit of a throwback here. Band of Brothers. So this would have come out in the early, it was either early 2000s or late 90s. I should look that up. But on HBO, based off of it's a very close adaptation of the book of the same name, which tells the story of the 101st Airborne Division in World War II, starting with their training, and then they land or parachute into Normandy during D-Day. Just a phenomenal retelling of a critical time in history, and in particular through the lens of some what I would call pretty exceptional dudes, it's safe to say. So Band of Brothers, my number 4.
My number 4, it made me like Star Wars more. I've got The Mandalorian at number 4. I think this was the breath of fresh air that Star Wars needed. I think Star Wars is getting stale. I think 7, 8, 9 proves that.
Yep. Did you remember that The Mandalorian, by the way, was the first piece of original content that Disney Plus dropped on that platform?
And what a start.
Wow. I didn't remember that until I was doing research for the pod.
What a start.
Yeah.
It was well worthwhile being the first.
No joke.
Because if people at that time were like, this is what they're going to put out?
Correct.
Oh my gosh, we're in for a treat. Okay? But I'd say it's still pretty consistent.
Yes.
With its production. And so, yeah, I got The Mandalorian at number 4.
It's a great number 4.
Now, at number 3, I have this is my other serious show, and then the rest are comedies. I have Game of Thrones.
There you go.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because it's one of the very few shows where when things were happening, well, first of all, you're very invested in the characters. Yep. You're like, oh, you're rooting for some guy, or you want somebody to die. Oddly enough, now that I'm thinking about it, now that I've gotten really into WWE, very similar vibes, okay? Because WWE, you have these characters that you're just absolutely rooting for.
Yes.
And when you get the heel turn, right? Or somebody, in this case in Game of Thrones, just dies. Right. You're like, no! Why? And so I remember one of the season finales in my sophomore year of college. I had all my friends over that watched it, and we were all like at the edge of our seats for the final like episode for the finale, and it was fantastic. So at number 3, I have to give it to Game of Thrones, even though the ending was shit. But that's a story for another day.
At least everybody's unified on that, though.
Yes.
Right? Like, I haven't encountered a single person that has watched that show that said, the ending was great. Or at least I'm okay with it. No, everybody has said, terrible.
The worst thing that happened in Game of Thrones was having George R.R. Martin walk off and not be a writer anymore.
Yep.
That's what hurt it the most.
Yep. Pretty tough to overcome. Well, my number 3 is The Office. Just an absolute gem. And I'm really curious. I wonder at what point something broke in me where I am no longer bothered at all by the cringiness of so many of those scenes. I just find them so much more funny. Like Scott's Tots, that episode.
I couldn't sit through it.
It's just incredible. It's so good. And I die every time I watch it. But I totally understand when someone's going, I just can't do it, because of the cringe is just elite. Absolutely elite. But that show, again, another show that unfortunately outlived its usefulness. After Michael Scott leaves, it's just a totally different ballgame. And listen, it's not even bad. It's not The Office without Michael Scott. It's just not. But
it should have ended with Mike.
It should have. So in my mind, that's where I choose to just go done. Shun, unshun. The Office. That's my number 3. My number 2 is Friends. Absolutely incredible. Again, another one of those shows that, well, I will say with the exception of season 1, they were clearly trying to figure out what the heck they were doing.
That's fair.
And what the heck they had. But by the time they hit their groove sometime in season 2, and it started probably after Ross got rid of the monkey, because what the hell are we doing? No character in New York needs a monkey as a pet. It just went gangbusters from there. Infinitely quotable. I will watch that show over and over again for the rest of my life. I will quote it for the rest of my life, and I will be a better man for it.
Well, and it's one of those rare sitcoms too, where it's like you can just watch an episode randomly, and it doesn't matter. Like, yes, there's overall arching stories throughout it, but at the same time, you're like, you get the gist.
Oh my gosh, right? Yeah, no question. So there you go. That's my number 2.
Okay,
Friends.
So these next 2 are 1 and 2 because of how often I watch clips of these 2 shows. Perfect. Number 2, I have New Girl. New Girl is an absolute banger, dude. Yeah. I love that show. At first, you kind of go in, especially as like a dude, you're like, this seems like this might
like a trap.
Be this seems like it might be a girl show, but I'm still gonna give it a shot. Yep. And it was fantastic. I was so happy to be wrong.
It's for both.
Oh
it's
my
for
God.
both genders. It's great.
Yeah, it
genuinely appeals to both.
And it's right up there with Friends. In the sense of quotability, and you can kind of just throw an episode on, and it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Yeah, I got New Girl at 2.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So,
all right, what's your number 1,
my
friend?
number 1, this will not surprise you at all, I have Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yep.
It is Andy Samberg. That is my boy. Honest to God, hilarious. They just did such a fantastic job on that show. Andre Braugher, I don't think he won an Emmy.
Wow, really?
Period. I don't think he did.
That's criminal.
And it is criminal. It's right up there with, did Michael Scott, did Steve Carell win one for Michael? I don't think
don't know.
I don't know if he did either.
Jeez.
So it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know how you didn't win an award.
We're even handing these awards out for if that's the case.
Right. So again, double check me. Because either way, he should have at least walked away with 3 of them.
Oh my gosh.
He should have at least had...
Nope, Steve Carell did not.
Steve Carell did not win an Emmy.
Garbage.
And check me on Andre Braugher.
Yep.
That's the other one I want to know. So, just to put you into perspective of these award shows, I do not know how Michael Scott, as iconic as he is, did not win an Emmy. That mind-boggling to me.
No, didn't win one for...
Andre Braugher did not either.
So, what are we doing?
Goes to show you exactly what I'm saying. So... those 2 alone carried that show. Fantastic. And oh my God, I love it. So that's my number 1.
Those are great pulls.
Yeah.
Great pulls. For me, my number 1 is Breaking Bad.
That was my call.
Yep, you knew. It is, and I don't know what will ever unseat it in my mind. It's kind of in this place of just this sacred place at this point. It is the best, most well-crafted story I think I've watched in terms of character development from start to finish. And it's hard to even compare that to movies because it just is allowed to be a slow burn, but it's also, in my opinion, perfect in that it only goes for 5 seasons, right? So they don't let themselves hang out for too long. Now there's since been a spin-off or two, but that's great. Let the spin-offs live in their own world. They didn't make that mistake of trying to stretch the show proper from what it was. But the absolute masterfulness of every character in this show is so different by the time their respective storylines conclude. Not all of them make it to the end, but even those that do have changed so dramatically. Now, it's a tragedy. It doesn't end in oh, that's really nice. How happy. It's a sad story, but it is as worthwhile and as highly as I can possibly recommend a TV show to anybody. So for me, Breaking Bad, numero uno.
Well, it's nice that not every show ends with a happy ending.
Right.
It's not real life, unfortunately.
Right. It's part of what I remember watching it for the first time in particular that was so fascinating is you go from rooting for the primary protagonist, Walter White, to legitimately rooting against him in the last, 20, 25% of the show. And you just want the other characters to overcome him.
Right.
It's wild. And I've never had that experience. And don't expect to again. But it was just an incredible, incredible series of television. So Breaking Bad, number 1.
There you go.
There you go. Riles. I think that's it.
That is it.